All right, well, it's 9:30 and I don't want to take any more of anybody else's time. So we're going to go ahead and get started this morning. My name is Kenny Davis and I am the safety coordinator for the Northeast region for GMS. So some of you may have talked to me before. Some of you, this might be our first introduction. Um, again, this morning we're talking about emergency action plans. Just a little bit about myself. Um, I've got about 11 years of experience in the safety profession. About 5 years of that is in consulting. And then I also was a trainer through the Georgia Tech OSHA Training Institute and Education Center before. Have a fair amount of experience training. So let's jump into everything this morning. Some learning objectives we're going to be covering are developing an emergency action plan. One thing I'd like to start off with is that emergency action plans is one of those things that, regardless of about what industry you're in, you're going to need at least an emergency action plan. You might get away from having to have a confined space program or something like that, but an emergency action plan pretty much applies across the board. Um, we're going to be talking about assigning responsibilities because just like anything else in safety, it's not just one person's responsibility to make sure that the emergency action plan is in place and effective, implemented, and employees are trained on it. Understanding the process of emergency action plan, learning the steps in handling emergencies, addressing natural disasters and man-made disasters, and how they affect the workplace. Um, Again, some additional things that we'll be covering are how to develop a plan, fire and medical emergencies, what to do if we have power loss or extended power loss, what to do in the event of small chemical spills, telephone bomb threats, and severe weather and natural disasters, which is a pretty big topic right now. If you've been watching the news, we've got wildfires in Hawaii, and I think there was a tropical storm or a hurricane that hit the West Coast. So these are relevant things that we're dealing with now. So developing a plan, there's a few elements of an emergency action plan. The first being to identify preferred procedures for reporting an emergency. So, if I come across a fire in my plant or my facility, who am I going to report that to? Am I going to pick up the phone and call somebody, call 911? Am I going to let my supervisor know and they're going to report it to the local authorities? That's what we're talking about there. The next part is going to be emergency routes. Um, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here, but we'll just continue going on here. So, routes and exit procedures. So, how are we going to evacuate? What routes are we going to take to get out of the building? But if we're talking about a weather emergency, where are we going to go? In the event of a weather emergency, where can we shelter in place? Where can we get that there's no windows and can get away from exterior walls and different things like that? Um, Responsibilities within the plan. So who's responsible for maintaining critical operations? So let's say that when we talk about that, it's not, oh, turn the lights on before you leave. It's more of, if we leave this process running, is it going to create a larger hazard, for those in the area, for the first responders and things like that? Uh, and so just having somebody's responsibility to be to either neutralize or control that feature or process before they evacuate the building. Um, Anybody who has responsibilities as far as helping out with evacuation or medical procedures or anything like that, they need to know what their responsibilities are in that as well. Um, and then going on forward with that is having a list of all those personnel that have responsibilities so that if I have any questions as an employee, I can reach out and call them and say, hey, what do we do in the event of this happening? So that I can get more information on those specific areas. One of the last things we'll talk about before training, and again, this is just kind of a quick overview. Um, is going to be the employee alarm system. So how are we going to alert people that there's an emergency? It Can we use the same type of alarm system for every type of emergency? Of course not. We can't rely on a fire alarm, pull station if it's a weather emergency, because then we're running outside the building into the emergent or into the hazardous situation. Um, and then lastly is going to be employee training, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So the definition of an emergency action plan is basically, it's your procedures and policies put in place to protect um, human life and save human life and protect the property at which you are, working in your facility. So there's different types of emergencies. There's mainly two, so man-made and natural disasters. Man-made include fire, active shooter, which unfortunately tends to be a big one. I have a little bit of not direct experiences with this, but I used to live in Atlanta. My wife was working at an autism clinic down there, and the adjacent business to them actually had an active shooter, and so her business also had to react to that. So I do have a little bit of experience with that, and just knowing how stressful that can be and different things like that. So unfortunately, that's something that we have to deal with with today's climate. But kind of going forward. Power outage, and most likely power outages are due to natural disaster, but it's definitely something to take into account whenever we're dealing with our emergency action plan. Different systems are going to be down, and things like that. Bomb threats, chemical spills, airplane crash. I put that one in there because I found it interesting. Again, living in Atlanta, I had a client. Sorry, get a quick drink of water here. Had a client that was located near the airport down there, and I went in to review their programs. And sure enough, they had a procedure in place for what to do if an airplane would crash into their building or adjacent to their building, and how they would handle that. Getting into the natural disasters, uh, wildfires, tornadoes, hurricanes, flooding, blizzards, earthquakes. These are all types of emergencies that you may deal with, and really, that is the first step in developing your emergency action plan. When we talk about developing an emergency action plan, we first thing is to sit down and kind of think about what type of emergencies could happen at our facility and how could it affect us and how are we going to control it, or how are we going to protect our employees and our property. And so, you know, generically, we can all probably think about a few that we are susceptible to. So there's always risk for a fire emergency, whether it's caused by somebody in our in-house, whether it's an electrical issue, whether an adjacent building catches on fire and results in the fire spreading to our building. There's probably a good chance that we're going to, we could put fire on our list. Another one that I always like to talk to employees or companies about is a medical emergency. Inevitably, it's not something that we plan on or that we want to anticipate, rather, but people get hurt. People get hurt at work. We try to prevent it the best we can, but sometimes it's inevitable, and so how we react to those types of emergencies as well. Um, Weather emergencies, again, it's out of our control. Things like power outages, again, out of our control. So the first step in creating this plan is addressing what all can happen, and then you're building like smaller procedures for each one of these. And you're going to be addressing all those elements that I had mentioned earlier, and all of them as to how you're going to react, who you're going to contact, who's going to report it, what alarm system you're going to be used, and so on. Um, the other thing I wanted to talk about, say that you're the business that you're in, maybe you have several facilities on your property that your employees work in. Uh, it may all fall under one emergency action plan, but there's going to be specific aspects of those plans that are different. Uh, Specifically, it's going to be like your emergency routes and exit procedures. Buildings probably aren't going to be identical. The hazards and routes that people need to take around are not going to be identical, and so those are going to vary. Another thing, maybe your emergency alarm system is set up, you have a PA system, it's set up in two of the three buildings, but not the third building. And so you need to account for that. So make sure that you address that whenever you're building out your emergency action plan. Another thing that you want to think about is if you're in the construction industry or if you're in the industry where you are servicing clients at their locations. You want to make sure that one, your employees are protected under an emergency action plan at that facility, or if you're like the general contractor, that you've developed an emergency action plan so that other trades and those contractors that are on site have a safe way of um, evacuating or sheltering in place and further protecting themselves during any kind of emergency situation. Assigning responsibility. We talked about this a little bit earlier is, this is not a one person job. There's several hats to be worn in an emergency action plan. You're going to have an overall coordinator, likely, somebody who oversees the plan and makes the updates and different things like that. Um, but, as far as, things like reporting the emergency, I talked about that earlier, some procedures may be like, hey, if you see a fire, you call 911, regardless of who you are. Um, a medical emergency, it may say, hey, contact the nearest supervisor. Um, and that supervisor then has the responsibility. And so just determining what those are, monitoring evacuation. The other thing that I didn't mention earlier was accounting for employees after an evacuation. So who's going to have the responsibility of taking roll call once they've made it to that muster point or that rally point outside of the building? Those persons with responsibilities with rescue, medical, or critical plant operations duties. Any the person who is going to determine closure periods due to utility outages or somebody who's going to address chemical spill cleanup. So let's say that you work in a facility where you're dealing with a lot of chemicals and there's the potential for a large chemical release. Then you're probably going to have somebody trained in hazardous waste response, um, so that they can handle the cleanup and different things like that. Um, and then addressing the expectations of each employee involved. Um, We've already kind of went over this as far as what these aspects are of an emergency action plan. An evacuation map. This is something really important and critical to an emergency action plan. It it allows us to we analyze the facility whenever we're building it out and say, okay, what's our primary exit routes? What's the easiest way to get somebody out of the building the quickest, most efficient? And again, it could be getting somebody out of the building, or it could be getting somebody to a safe location to shelter in place inside the building. So you got to address both. And so there's different things that you want to address. First off, is you should have at least two evacuation routes in case one gets blocked. So you'll have a primary and then you'll have a secondary. Um, Other things that you might want to address are locations of fire extinguishers, so including those in the maps, locations of fire alarm pull stations, so that okay, if I'm running out this route, we can go ahead and pull this and let everybody know to get out of the building. Assembly areas. So as you can see in this picture here, we have an assembly area marked out here. Um, Physical markings out in the parking lot. You see those sometimes where they'll have a sign out there that says this is the rally point, rally one, or whatever have you. But on your map, it should be identified on there. Elevators, during a fire, you shouldn't be taking an elevator, so it's good to identify those areas and to kind of say, okay, we can't take the elevator, take the steps. So identify stairway locations, flammable liquid storage areas. So whenever you're determining these primary and secondary exit routes, your path should not be through or by or passing by flammable storage areas, combustible storage areas that could, promote a larger hazard or put the employees in more danger. So whether you have to redirect or relocate those storage locations, or if you have to redirect your route, just make sure that you're accounting for that. Um, Other things to add to your emergency action or your emergency evacuation maps: first aid locations, AED locations, backboards. If you need to have help or if you need to assist carrying somebody out. Wheelchair locations. I used to work at a pharmaceutical plant, and we had, there was high likelihood if somebody was overexposed to a particular medication that they were making, that maybe they wouldn't be able to walk out if they were exposed, and so providing wheelchairs and things like that for safe egress of those individuals, or if maybe they just get hurt in general. Um, Bathrooms, you can't evacuate through a bathroom, so don't route your exit path through a bathroom. Um, OSHA doesn't recognize dock doors as um, a means of an exit. Of course, if the door is open, I understand we're going to run out it, but make sure that you have designated exit doors. ADA exits, that's something to account for too. So anybody with disability can safely make an exit out a ramp rather than having to go downstairs if necessary. This map kind of further details a little bit what that I was talking about with my plan. As you can see down here, we have a flammable storage room in the corner. It's directing people down the stairs and away from the elevators. You can see there's ADA access points and evacuation points, fire extinguisher locations. The bathrooms are identified on there, and so on. Training. So, training needs to occur initially, and then anytime there's an update to the plan, anytime somebody's responsibilities change, those are all times at which we require additional training under OSHA's requirements. Um, in addition to that, yeah, covering the plan is one thing, but actually putting the plan into effect and using a drill is really the way that people are going to learn and understand where they need to go. Um, OSHA doesn't have any requirements for having evacuation drills or minimum number. You should be doing them at least once a year, if not ever twice a year or quarterly, just to make sure that your employees know exactly how to get in and out of the building. Another thing to think about too, and I should have mentioned this earlier, is facilities that I've dealt with before. Say that your building's under construction, um, and it's affecting a primary exit route. Now you have to account for that, and you have to make temporary exit route signs and put those up. And you should be training your employees on where they need to go so that they don't go down the wrong path and they can't actually get out. Um, we talked about employee alarm systems a little bit. They should be distinctive, per the emergency that you're dealing with. So with a fire, it's definitely appropriate to use like a pull station, or maybe you have an air horn, or maybe you have a PA system, or whatever system it is. It needs to be distinctive, so that people recognize that it's a fire emergency that they need to evacuate. Different things are going to be it'll vary if you're dealing with like in a medical emergency. Not everybody really needs to know if there's a medical emergency, and so that alarm system may be a little bit different. Same with a bomb threat, you're going to handle that a little bit differently too. Or if you have an active shooter on site, obviously you're not going to be able to make that announcement, hey, there's an active shooter on site, and so there has to be another way to alert employees of those issues that are going on. Um, Fire and medical emergencies. We'll get into this. We've covered a lot of this already. And again, This is just saying that, this is a very generic fire emergency plan. So this may work for you, it may not work for you. And this one, it's talking about using uh, a pull station. You may not have pull stations at your facility, but again, just establishing what works for you, how you're going to communicate that to your employee is important. After being notified, you want to make sure that you evacuate the building using the routes, assemble in a designated area. If you have to, uh, neutralize or control any kind of critical equipment before evacuating, take care of that. Um, you want to remain outside until it's safe to re-enter, and then report problems to the emergency coordinator. Um, Work area monitors. This is something good to have in place and to account for if you do have uh, personnel within your, whether it be employees or whether it be visitors at your facility, um, that have some kind of physical um, disability, which affects their mobility, is to, have people who have been trained to help those individuals evacuate. Another thing that's important to have, and a lot of the facilities that I go to, kind of going it back into the accounting for employees, is having a sign-in sheet at your front desk. That way you know who's at your facility and when, and so that you can make sure that everybody's made it out safely. Um, Perform an accurate head count and then report any kind of missing personnel. So it's really important, not only um, for just kind of the OSHA requirement, but for um, even firefighter safety. Whenever we're talking about taking that head count, accounting for employees after an evacuation, that is going to help let our, fire personnel know, those emergency responders know who's in the building. Um, and so, they're not running into the building if so and so is standing right out there beside you and they're putting themselves in more harm to look for somebody who's already outside. Other designated personnel operate fire extinguishers. Of course, you had to be trained at least annually to operate fire extinguishers. But if it's your company's policy that your employees will use an extinguisher to fight incipient stage like trash can size fires, then so be it. As long as they're trained and provided with the appropriate equipment, um, it's appropriate. Um, just you want to make sure that you disconnect utilities and equipment, shut windows and doors, provide personnel with necessary information, and perform an assessment and coordinate emergency closing procedures. Extinguishing fires. Um, Obviously, if you've pulled an extinguisher, you should be calling 911 because the fire may get out of control where the extinguisher that you're using may not be able to put it out. So again, fire extinguishers are for those small trash can size, um, incipient stage fires. Um, Call 911, get the professionals there so that they can back you up and make sure that you're good. Another thing, if you're using a fire extinguisher, you always want to make sure that you have a safe exit behind you. Never block yourself in. Medical emergencies, again, everybody's procedure is going to be different. If you see somebody go down, maybe it's your company's policy to contact the supervisor, and the supervisor will call 911, or maybe you guys have first aid team on site or a nurse or something on site, and they can provide that aid to that employee, to get them stabilized, and then if necessary, call medical, call EMS to come take the victim or the person who's been injured to the hospital. Extended power loss. This is something, and a lot of these you'll see are things that can affect us everywhere, including at home. So it's good to not only address these things at the workplace, but also at home, and how your family can react to these types of emergencies. So, uh, precautionary measures to take whenever you've lost power or there's extended power loss is to Turn off all unnecessary electrical equipment and appliances. Turn off and drain the following: the sprinkler system, standpipes, potable water lines, and toilets. Add non-toxic antifreeze to the drains. Move equipment containing fluids that may freeze, especially whenever we're dealing with lower temperatures during the wintertime. When the power returns, the electronic equipment should be brought up to ambient temperatures before energizing, and check fire and water piping for leaks. Anytime you energize another, a pipe, there's a likelihood that, that kind of pressure coming all at once could produce a leak. Chemical spills, so procedures for we're going to cover procedures for large spills and small spills. Um, again, whatever your policy is, to notify, a supervisor, or maybe you have an emergency coordinator, maybe you have a spill response team. Notify those individuals, evacuate the building as necessary. You want to secure the area. Um, Attend to any injured personnel that may have came in contact with or may have been exposed to the chemical. Call the emergency medical number if required. Begin containing the spill only if trained and authorized. So, not just anybody should be dealing with chemical spills. You actually have to have a specific training for that. Um, and then activate the spill cleanup procedures. So, things that you'd want to address are: do we have spill containment kits and spill cleanup kits? Do we have trained personnel that can handle these spills? If not, do we have a third-party contractor that can come in and take care of this for us? So, again, this is going to be going back to evaluating what can happen at your facility and how you're going to control it in the event that such event occurs. Um, Procedures for cleaning up a small chemical spill: immediately notify the designated individual or official, secure the area, review the spill cleanup procedures, deal with the spill according to the SDS. Of course, your safety data sheets, and we're not going to jump into a full-blown HAZCOM conversation, but your safety data sheets are going to tell you how you need to address a chemical release or a chemical spill, how you need to address any kind of first aid, or preventative measures as far as PPE that need to be worn or taken care of, to prevent any kind of exposure or injury to the employee. Bomb threats, we'll talk about how to handle them and steps taken after the call. So treat all threats seriously. You never know when one's a threat versus when one's real. You always want to stay calm and be courteous. Listen and don't interrupt the person who is making the threat. Keep the caller talking. Try to gather as much information as possible without kind of intruding or escalating the situation. Fill out a checklist with observations. Write a note to a colleague so you're not actually like verbalizing that, so you can pass it um, non-verbally and not raise any kind of suspicion. At the end of the call, you want to activate your malicious call trace. Hang up the phone and do not answer it. Call personnel and provide information. If a description of the bomb location was given, communicate the information. Determine whether the caller appeared familiar with the facility. Is it a disgruntled employee? Is it somebody that's just, an outsider that's um, not familiar with the facility? Write out the message that was given. Notify your supervisor. The supervisor is probably then going to call 911 to get the authorities involved, because likely your facility is not equipped with dealing with any acts of terrorism or anything like that. Um, Severe weather and natural disasters. So again, tornadoes, earthquakes, floods, tsunamis, depending on where you're at, hurricanes, blizzards. We'll also talk about what to do if you're stranded in a vehicle. So tornadoes, if you're out in the Midwest and the plains areas and flat locations, tornadoes are typically, a big threat of dealing with. And so the main thing when we talk about tornadoes is how do we shelter ourselves away from it? So having those shelter in place locations, areas free from windows, free from exterior walls if possible. If you don't have any locations like that, get to a stairwell. Um, and stay away from outside walls and windows. Use your arms to protect your head and neck. So we've all been to public school probably. You know, you crouch down, you bury your head in your chest and remain sheltered until an all clear is given. Earthquakes. You know, California is and the West Coast are known for having a lot of earthquakes. You always want to get under a protective structure and hold on. Keep your head down. Get in that same crouch position as you would with a tornado. Keep away from overhead fixtures, windows, filing cabinets, and electrical power sources. Basically, anything that can fall on you, you want to protect yourself from. Stay in your safe place and remain calm. Evacuate only if instructed. If outside, stay outside and away from buildings, trees, and power lines. Be on the lookout for fires and stay ready or be ready for aftershocks. For a flood or tsunami, probably not dealing with too many tsunamis based on where we're located, but floods for sure. So be ready to evacuate, follow recommended routes. You know, if you live in an area, and we'll talk about hurricanes too, but if you live in an area that's prone to hurricanes, they always have those evacuation route signs posted along the highway or road. Um, so follow those. If outdoors, follow evacuation routes or climb to high ground and stay there. Avoid walking or driving through water. And if your vehicle stalls, abandon it. Don't sit in a car with rising water. Don't drive through any kind of pooling water because you know it'll usually stall your engine and then you'll be stranded. Hurricanes, you know, it's a lot of these, especially with the weather emergencies, you want to stay in tune with your local radio stations, with your local news or however you get it. You know, we get news so many different ways now, whether it be Facebook, TikTok, CNN, Fox, NBC, you know, you can get news however you want, but you know, it's always good to watch that and just to keep up with the updates. Uh, Whenever you're going from a watch to a warning, I always get this one confused, but a watch is issued when a hurricane becomes a threat, and a warning is issued when winds of 74 miles per hour or dangerously high water is expected within 24 hours. Um, Once a hurricane watch has been issued, stay calm, await instructions, monitor local TV and radio stations, like I was talking about, secure the building, and prepare machinery and equipment. So you want to secure everything, strap, you know, button down all the hatches to make sure everything's safe, and that you're preserving your property as well as much as you can. Remain indoors whenever it hits. Choose a shelter. Again, small interior room without windows, lowest floor possible. Hallway, always away from doors and windows on the lowest floor. A room with no windows constructed with reinforced concrete, brick, or blocks. If flooding is expected, avoid the lowest floor. Blizzards. Something weird to talk about, you know, in the middle of August, but, you know, depending on where we're at and located in the US, blizzards are definitely a high hazard. It's good to stay calm. Again, stay in tune with your local news and media. Await instructions, stay indoors. If there is no heat, close off unneeded rooms or areas to preserve the heat. In the rooms that you'll be sheltering in, stuff towels or rags in the cracks under doors, cover the windows at night, eat and drink, stay hydrated, and wear layers. If you're stranded in a vehicle, stay in the vehicle. Run the motor about 10 minutes an hour. Open the windows a little. Make sure the exhaust pipe is not blocked. You know, this is going to prevent any kind of carbon monoxide buildup in the vehicle. Make yourself visible to rescuers. So turn on your hazard lights. You know, sound your horn. Turn on the dome light at night. tie a colored cloth to your antenna or door, raise the hood when snow stops falling, and exercise. So, in summary, to summarize everything that we've discussed today, with our emergency action plans, we outline the steps to follow in the event of an emergency. The emergency action plan includes procedures for reporting, evacuating, accounting, and responding to emergencies. It designates employees who are responsible um, for certain aspects of the emergency action plan, assures that employees know their procedures and roles, includes medical, fire, power, chemical, bomb threats, severe weather, and natural disasters. One link that I posted on here, um, and you guys can I can share this in the chat. It's the emergency action plan tool, e-tool that OSHA has, and it will actually walk you step by step on how to build out an emergency action plan. Um, does anybody have any questions, concerns, comments that they would like to ask or share, or experiences that they would like to share? How we looking in the chat, Logan?
We're looking good. I don't see any comments just yet.
Okay.
Someone said, "Do you have any standard forms for emergency? Do you have any standard forms or example emergency plans?"
So we have our own template with GMS for an emergency action plan that we can definitely send to you. Just reach out. I think Logan put it in the chat earlier. Reach out to your coordinator. If you don't know who your coordinator is, reach out to him and he'll let you know who it is, and then they can definitely provide you with that form.
I went ahead and put my email too in the chat. So if anyone does want to reach out and see who their safety coordinator is, as long as you tell me the company name that you're with, I can go ahead and provide you that information.
All right. Well, it doesn't look like we have any questions coming in. I'd like to take this time to thank you guys again for joining us this morning. I hope you guys were able to take something away from it. And again, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I can put my email in the chat, or your safety coordinator if you have any questions or comments. Um, put this in here real quick.
I guess to make it easier, they could reach out to their account manager too, as well, and your account manager should be able to provide you with your safety coordinator too.
Yep. Yep, that works as well. So my email is in there as well. Feel free again if you guys have any questions or if there's anything I can help you out with, just let me know. But with that, I think we'll go ahead and close out. Again, thank you all for your time.